The entire population of China is going to be dead tomorrow because of this earthquake. What are you going to do tonight? And Smith said, you're going to say, oh, I'm so sorry. And then you're going to snore placidly through the night. Then he says, imagine that tomorrow you're going to lose your pinky finger. What are you going to do tonight? You're going to have anxiety. You're not going to be able to sleep. You're going to, oh, the pinky finger, I'm going to lose it tomorrow. And going to be very, very anxious. Population of China dead? I don't care. Little finger, but what if you were told, if you do give up your little finger, you can save the entire population of China? What are you going to do? The presentation for today, the title is The Adam Smith Problem in Reverse, Self-Interest in the Wealth of Nations and Inferior Moral Sentiments. And the reason why I use the Adam Smith problem in reverse is because Adam Smith, as you may know, was considered the father of economics, so he's considered the father of economics, because of the publication of his second book, The Wealth of Nations. But his day job was to teach moral philosophy. He was a professor of moral philosophy at the University of Glasgow in Scotland. And his first publication was The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And it is because of this publication, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, that he became famous. And he became so famous that a local nobleman asked him to become the private tutor of his son. So at that time, nobles would not go to universities. They would be educated privately. And in particular, when they came of age, they would take a tour of Europe for a few years with a tutor so that they would actually learn from the tutor and meet the other noblemen around Europe. So Smith was asked to leave the University of Glasgow to become the private tutor of this young nobleman. So he went with him in France. And while he was in France, he writes home saying, I'm so bored, I pass my time writing a book. And that book turns out to be The Wealth of Nations. But going forward, today, or in the late 1900s, people started to look at both books and say that those two books were strange because they do not match. There's contradiction between the two. And in particular, this idea came from some German scholars who did not like Britain. And they associated Adam Smith with Britain, saying everything that comes out of Britain is not appropriate for Germany at that time. And so they were saying, well, Adam Smith writes The Theory of Moral Sentiments, is a theory of moral sentiments, is a book about morality, is a book about benevolence, is a book about caring for others. And then he writes The Wealth of Nations. He writes The Wealth of Nations that talks about wealth, it talks about becoming rich, it talks about self-interest. Therefore, the two books are in contradiction with each other because one talks about self-interest, selfishness, greed. The other talks about benevolence, caring, sentiments. So this guy is not a good person to study because he contradicts himself. So that's the origin of the so-called Adam Smith problem. It is a problem that the same author writes about economics, self-interest, selfishness, greed, and sentiments, benevolence, care, regarding for others. And this Adam Smith problem has been transmitted in the literature for a long time, until very, very recently. People still talk about the Adam Smith problem, contradiction between the two books. And so what I'm suggesting is that not only there is not an Adam Smith problem, which is a common view now, in the last couple of decades, people said, no, it's nonsense to talk about the contradiction between the two books. Usually the two books now are read together. But what I'm suggesting, given the title of this work, is that if there is an Adam Smith problem, it is in reverse. That the book that prizes self-interest is actually a theory of moral sentiments. The book that criticizes self-interest is The Wealth of Nations. I'm not talking about benevolence, but it's just looking at self-interest. That The Wealth of Nations is a book that actually criticizes self-interest, while in the theory of moral sentiments, the view of self-interest is more positive. For me, this is important because The Wealth of Nations is considered the book that founded economics. And usually the idea of economics is the idea that people that are driven by self-interest achieve unintentionally good for society, which is the image of the invisible hand, right? If I pursue my interests, I will benefit everybody else, even if I don't mean to. But I think that if we read The Wealth of Nations with care, the book is not just the father or the foundation of economics, but is also the foundation of a sub-branch of economics, which is called public choice. Public choice is this branch of economics that studies government and decision-making at the political level, assuming that politicians are self-interested. They are not benevolent. Traditionally, in political science, the assumption is that politicians or the government, the parliaments, are benevolent and are care about doing the right thing. Public choice, on the other hand, is a branch of economics that thinks that it's not necessarily true that a politician is benevolent. A politician, when he goes to the grocery store, is self-interested. Why, when he goes to parliament, has to become benevolent? Right? So the same person that goes to the grocery store and goes to the parliament. So there is not a change that happens just because you are a legislator. So public choice sees government decisions driven by interests. And what I'm saying is that The Wealth of Nations is also the foundation, the starting point for public choice. And it's therefore that when self-interest is backed by the force of the government, becomes problematic. And rather than enriching society, impoverishes society. It is also important for me because from the theory of moral sentiments, what we learn is that approbation matters. That receiving positive comments from others matters. In economic decisions as well. Let's start looking at theory of moral sentiments and Wealth of Nations. And I think that the starting point is that self-interest is present in both books. The caricature presentation of the theory of moral sentiments, well, it's a book about benevolence, it's a book about caring about others. Yes, it is true up to a certain point. It is a book that describes human beings in its fullness. And among the other passions that we have, there's also self-interest. So self-interest is present in both Wealth of Nations and theory of moral sentiments, not just in Wealth of Nations. And in both theory of moral sentiments and Wealth of Nations, self-interest is not the only motivation for our actions. There's other passions that drive us. So given that there is self-interest in both books, what is going to happen? What is the best possible thing that is going to happen? According to The Wealth of Nations, there's a standard story that all economists No. The best thing that can happen if you have self-interest is a society is going to be better off than visible hand. Individual prosper, society prospers. In the Wealth of Nations, the story is slightly different. It's also very positive. That individuals, even when they are self-interest, learn how to be impartial, learn how to live a good life. Now, I assume that you are not as familiar with the theory of moral sentiments as you may have been with the Wealth of Nations. So I'm going to describe a little bit how Smith tells us that we develop a moral sense. So that allows us to understand why interest in the theory of moral sentiments is going to generate positive consequences. Smith tells us that we are born with a desire to be lovely and to be admirable. This is different than being loved and being admired. Being lovely and admirable means that we deserve the approbation of others. We deserve the love of others. Of course, we want to be loved and we want to be approved. But we want to be loved and approved for the right reasons. If we are approved for the wrong reasons, yes, we are happy because we are approved. But we would be happier if we are approved for the right reasons. We think, when we are little, that we are the center of the world. It's me, 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 me. It's only me. I am the best, and everybody else doesn't matter. But I want to be loved. I want to be lovely. I want to be approved. I want to be approvable. I want to deserve the approbation of others. So if I think of myself as the center of the universe, and then I meet you, you also think that you are the center of the universe. Now we have a problem, because we can't both be the center of the universe. So in order for me to receive the approbation of others, I have to tone down my feelings. I have to tone down my passions. So with interactions with others, I learn that I'm not the center of the universe. I learn that I'm just one among others. And so I will adjust, Smith says, the pitch of my passions to receive the approbation of others. So if I get a paper cut, like I cut my finger, and it burns, I wouldn't come here, my finger hurts, I'm so in pain, there's so much pain in my finger, it burns, and I keep going until the pain goes away. Because if I did it, you would think, this woman is crazy. Like, why did you bring her here, right? And the reason why I will not do it, even if it hurts, is because I know that you think that I am crazy if I did it. How do I know it? Because I have in me an innate sense of putting myself in the shoes of another person and think, what would that person do if it was me? So I put myself in your shoes and I look at me from your position and I think, what would he think if I were actually start screaming about this? And I think, you think I'm crazy? And so I don't do it. So this process is an imagination process, and it's not something that we do consciously. We can do it consciously, but it's something that comes automatically, is innate in us. So I put myself in your position, and I look at me and think, what do you think about me? And if I think that you approve me, I do it. If I think that you don't approve me, I don't do it. If I think that you think that is too much, I would lower the pitch. If my reaction, on the other hand, is too small, or I think that you think that my reaction is too small, I'm going to increase the pitch, right? So I adjust the pitch of my passions, as Smith says, according to the judgment of the person who looks at me, or at least according to the judgment of the person that I imagine looks at me. This, for Smith, is how we develop morality. That we look around us and we see what kind of behavior is approved by the people in this room. And that is the kind of behavior that I will adopt because that is considered the proper behavior. So in a sense, it is in my interest to adjust the pitch of my passion according to the judgment of society, or to what I perceive to be the judgment of society. And this is why I think in the theory of moral sentiments, the best that can happen when you are self-interested is that you learn impartiality, that you learn what is a proper thing to do. And therefore, you learn how to live a good life. You learn impartiality, which is key for Smith for moral behavior, because for me to actually get the right pitch, the appropriate pitch of my passion, I need to be in a room full of strangers. Again, I use my paper cut example. If I cut my finger and it hurts, and I go to my mother and say, "Mom, my finger hurts." My mom was, "Oh, poor little girl. Yes, you're right. It hurts. It will go away. Don't worry." But my mom will give me comfort. Will not say, "Shut up." Because my mom loves, right? And it's just like my mom. Your mom too will do the same. Like you're always great in the eyes of your mom. But if I have a paper cut and it hurts, and I go to you, who I don't know who you are, I've never met you before, I say, "Oh, it hurts," and I start crying, you think, "Whoa, lady, please control yourself," right? So the impartiality comes from somebody who's not close to me. It's somebody that is far away from me is able to give me a more impartial judgment than somebody that is very close to me, who tend to be more sympathetic to me. In the theory, in the Wealth of Nations, we have the best possible scenario when self-interest is directed by the invisible hand to generate positive outcome to society. And in the theory of moral sentiment as well, self-interest in the best possible way, in the best possible scenario, will help you to create impartiality and to live well. Now, the problem comes in the opposite scenario. So the best thing that can happen, but what is the worst thing that can happen? In the Wealth of Nations, Smith tells us what happens in the worst case. If self-interested individuals are not constrained. If individuals are not constrained, their self-interest will take over and will become rapacity. What does it mean that it becomes rapacity? It means that I am willing and able to put myself on top of everybody else, even to hurt other people to benefit myself. I disregard others so that I can benefit. And the most effective way to do it is to use force. And the institution that has the most force is the government. So in The Wealth of Nations, Smith says, if self-interest is not constrained, you're going to become rapacious. You're going to try to capture the force of the state, to put yourself in a privileged position, even if you're stepping on other people's head. So you can use a government force to increase your profits and hurt the rest of society. These are the examples that Smith gives in the Wealth of Nations. So in the Wealth of Nations, Smith is very cautious about what self-interest can do, and is very worried of some of the consequences of self-interest, because if it is unconstrained, self-interest will cause negative effects on society, and society will become poorer as a consequence of individuals who are able to grab the power of the state and benefit themselves. Society will become poorer. What is the worst that can happen if there is self-interest in the theory of moral sentiments? Individuals will learn impartiality. Because if I try to put myself above everybody else, people will look down at me. People will disapprove of me. People will hate me. And I don't want that. Because what I want is to receive the approbation of others. So if my self-interest is very big in theory of moral sentiments, it will be constrained. Because other people will not approve of me. So in the theory of moral sentiments, because of the interactions that we have with others, because of this very strong desire to be loved, to be lovely, to be approved, to be approvable, we actually behave in an appropriate way. So the worst that can happen in the theory of moral sentiments, if self-interest is too much, is that you learn how to constrain it. You learn how to become impartial. Is there a solution for excess self-interest? And again, we compare the two volumes. In The Wealth of Nations, the solution is try to convince people that they shouldn't be self-interested. So The Wealth of Nations tells us that, again, when self-interest is out of control and it grabs the power of the state, merchants and manufacturers become very, very powerful, because now they have the power of the states that back them so that they can establish monopolies. They can give themselves privileges. They can say, I want this size of the market for myself and be the only person in this market. And they have the government to back them. The government will prevent other people to enter that market. Smith tells us that this can reach a level that the legislator is completely captured by special interest groups. So much so that they are able to engage in wars to conquer and defend territories that are now their markets. So Smith describes the creation and the maintenance of the British Empire as a product of the rapacity of merchants and manufacturers. So the British Empire for Smith was created by merchants and manufacturers to increase their profit, even though it was deleterious for the British citizens and the citizens of the colonies. So what is the solution? And Smith says, doesn't give us any solution, because it is very difficult to dismantle this situation. The only hope is to try to convince, maybe with the publication of The Wealth of Nations, to say, well, no, you shouldn't do this. is you're going to make yourself poorer if you do it. But if you do have that privilege, you're not going to give it up. So in the wealth of nations, it's very difficult to find a feasible solution to excess self-interest. In the theory of moral sentiments, again, the situation is very different. The outcome is this impartiality. I'm going to give you one example that shows how our different passions are able to constrain self-interest in the theory of moral sentiments so that you actually do not have excesses. Smith tells us, let's imagine that you're told that tomorrow the entire population of China, which at the time is at the far away place possible. Like, there's nothing farther away than China from Britain at the time. The entire population of China, so this faraway place, you don't know anybody there. You have no contact with them. You just know that it exists. The entire population of this place is going to be swallowed in an earthquake. So the entire population of China is going to be dead tomorrow because of this earthquake. What are you going to do tonight? As Smith said, you're going to say, oh, I'm so sorry. And then you're going to snore placidly through the night. Then he says, imagine that tomorrow you're going to lose your pinky finger. What are you going to do tonight? You're going to have anxiety. You're not going to be able to sleep. You're going to, oh, the pinky finger, I'm going to lose it tomorrow. And going to be very, very anxious. Right? Population of China dead? Oh, I don't care. Little finger, no, don't want to lose my little finger. And then he says, but what if you were told that if you do give up your little finger, you can save the entire population of China? What are you going to do? Are you going to keep your little finger, or are you going to take it out?
Obviously take it out.
You would take it out. And that's exactly what Smith says. Smith says, there is not a villain on earth that would keep his little finger and let the entire population of China die. And the reason why nobody, according to Smith, not even the scum of the earth, like a bad person, would keep his little finger and let the population of China die, because tomorrow morning you have to look at yourself in the mirror. And by looking yourself in the mirror, you don't want to see yourself in that mirror. Knowing that because of your little finger, the entire population of China died was your responsibility. Right? So Smith says, there's nobody on earth who would not give up his little finger. Because we look at ourselves, we learn how to look at ourselves like others look at us. So if you don't give up your little finger, and I know it, what do I think of you? Right? Like, she's evil. I mean, she's very greedy. Like, she kept her little finger, she let millions of people die. Would you like me to think so bad of you? Exactly. That's exactly what Smith tells us. It's like, you know that other people will think very badly of you. And so you say, no, thank you. I don't want to do that. I really want to deserve the approbation of others. So I give up my little finger and keep the population of China alive. So these are the passions that are balancing out. And so that self-interest is not just by itself. There are other passions, the desire to be loved and lovely, the desire to receive the deserved approval that contain it. So the solution in theory of moral sentiments for excess interest is this innate desire to receive the deserved approbation of others. So in the theory of moral sentiments, we do have mechanism that allows for a solution for excess self-interest. In the Wealth of Nations, we don't. In the theory of moral sentiments, there is a much more positive view of self-interest than there is in the Wealth of Nations because of the presence of approbation. In the wealth of nations, on the other hand, we have a much more problematic view of self-interest, because self-interest can lead us to grab the power of the state to benefit ourselves at the expense of others. And this is why I'm saying that if there is an Adam Smith problem, it is in reverse, because the more favorable view of self-interest is actually in theory of moral sentiments, as opposed to in the wealth of nations. Wealth of nations is much more critical of self-interest than the theory of moral sentiments. So that's what I'm suggesting. Thank you.